योगेन चित्तस्य पदेन वाचां मलं शरीरस्य च वैद्यकेन योपाकरोतं प्रवरं मुनीनां पतञ्जलिं प्राञ्जलिरानतोऽस्मि। आबाहुपुरुषाकारं शङ्खचक्रासिधारिणं सहस्रशिरसं श्वेतं प्रणमामि पतञ्जलिम्।
Good morning. It was wonderful watching 26 episodes. Each episode was very detailed and informative, and you have touched various aspects of Iyengar Yoga. This being a concluding session, do you have any guidance for the viewers as to what they should adapt in their practice?
So until now, just to sum it up, in every one of these episodes, as you said, we've been discussing asanas, looking at them in detail, how to do the classical pose, how to do variations with props, how to address certain conditions, etc. But these are basically done to give you a fundamental understanding of asanas itself. But practice is actually a whole different world. It is not really the right approach to just take some random asanas and fit it within a certain duration. Let's say if you have 45 minutes a day and you feel like doing this asana and that asana amongst the episodes shown so far, you can't pick them out and just randomly put them together in a practice. Usually, practice in our Indian sense is sadhana. Sadhana is an intense term. It's a term for a very arduous, dedicated, uninterrupted practice. When you do an asana should be a sadhana which is very penetrative on the inner body. You're able to look inside, you're able to get absorbed. Your vision, eyes, organs of perceptions like the ears, it should be able to hear the rhythm of the body inside. Your eyes should be able to see the movement of the asana or the way the asana operates on the inner body. And then it's a state of total absorption. That's really not possible when you randomly select asana or jump from one asana. Each asana should help you penetrate, go deeper inside and get you into a deeper state of awareness. Therefore, there is a sequence to your practice. That in Iyengar Yoga is called sequencing, and it's actually one of the main features of Iyengar Yoga itself.
Let me see if I got this right. You mentioned sequence as a set of asanas. As you know, the Surya Namaskara is a set of asanas which is done in a specific order, and I repeat it 10 to 11 times every day. Would you consider this as a sequence?
That's an interesting question actually. A Surya Namaskara, yes, is a sequence of asanas, and usually a person maintains a count. They would do it, let's say, 10 times or sometimes 108 times. They would maintain a target count. Usually a sadhana or the practice of an asana really should have total inward absorption. By inward absorptions, there are the organs of perceptions like the eyes, ears, nose, etc. And then there are the physical, that is the organs of action. They both need a link. That is one of the main essences of proper practice. By that I mean, usually let's say I'm looking at a picture, I'm looking outside, I'm hearing outside sounds, I'm smelling outside smells. But in asana, you have an inside vision, you're hearing inside sounds, the rhythm of the body. And then really even the breath, you're looking at how it travels inside. And then there is the entire aspect of symmetry. There is an asana which has a certain symmetrical principle, and then there is the body where the symmetry of the body needs to seamlessly fit into the symmetry of an asana. Symmetry alone gives, in our system we believe, that it gives physical, physiological and psychological alignment, health. So that being the case, when we are looking at Surya Namaskara, if it accommodates or entices all these principles, then it certainly comprises of a sequence. But what happens is, usually in Surya Namaskara, a practitioner is maintaining a count. That is, the mind is fixed on an external number. You're then thinking, you're doing a loop and then say, okay, 1 is over now. I just have 9 more to go. And then you say, you count 5 and then you say, I just have 5 more. Let me finish it. So then the mind is an external mind. You're actually fixing on something outside and there is very less chance for watchfulness inside. But if the same Surya Namaskara was done, let's say you're thinking I'm going to do it, extending the frontal face, the anterior length of the spine, then for every asana that you move into, it could be Adho Mukha Svanasana to Urdhva Mukha Svanasana, everywhere you're actually watching inside. You're thinking, am I lengthening the anterior spine? Am I lengthening the anterior spine? Then that mind is really not an account outside. It's looking internally and you're constantly driving that anterior spine length in every pose. As I said, a sequence should be target oriented. Am I going to like widen my collarbones? Then in every asana you choose, it should feed. It should be the source to really widen that collarbone, penetrate into the body sequentially. So if you're able to do that in Surya Namaskara, great. That is a well accomplished sequence. Otherwise, you should choose a sequence itself. See, for example, every pose you should have a long neck so that the cervical neck is not crushed. In Shirshasana also you should have that. In Shirshasana, it demands a long cervical neck, but that may not be the preparatory grounds for a long cervical neck. You should already do that with all asanas so that while going to Shirshasana, the Shirshasana already incorporates that long neck. So you should then see which asanas am I choosing to get this penetration. So if you're able to do it in Surya Namaskara, it's great. Otherwise, you should choose a sequence that really targets on a particular principle, or it could be a culminating pose. Now I'm going to choose a common example. See, you see in today's day and age, because everybody works on the computer, they spend a lot of time maybe even riding a bike, the posture is more stooping forward. So it's also common for everybody to relate to, I think, when we say hunched back. So let me then give you an idea of a sequence which would then address that. But here I would like to elaborate. A hunchback means a protruding dorsal spine, okay, and a closed chest. But the gateway to that could be pulling the back ribs in, pulling the dorsal spine, rolling the shoulder back because the shoulder stoops, lifting the sternum up. So there are so many things that come into a hunchback. I'm just going to give you an overall general addressal through a sequence. Let's see that now.
That would be very helpful.
So now we are giving you an example of a sequence. Again, a well-established sequence takes quite some time, around 2.5 hours. I'm just giving you a sample, and this is to address a common relatable condition, hunched back, or where the spine is stooping forward. We will now start with Tadasana as the first asana in this sequence. In Tadasana, the student stands with the collarbones wide, shoulder rolled back, chest up, chest, that is the entire chest away from the diaphragm, back ribs in. Now, we are looking at reversing a hunched back, which means the protrusion of the dorsal spine should be pulled in. For that, I would like the student to interlock their hands behind the back. I'll show you. You can turn the other side. As you can see, he's interlocked the hands behind, approximately in line with the top buttock. So the hands are lightly up. Then, rolling the shoulder sharply back and aligning the elbows centrally. Why I say that is the elbow, if it flares out, it will again stoop the shoulder forward. So the elbows need to be aligned medially, and aligning the elbows medially, pulling the dorsal spine into the body, that is dorsal spine towards sternum. Pulling it in, I would like the practitioner to then lengthen the interlock down. As the interlock lengthens down, you have to really pump the body and lift the chest up. As the arm lengthens, the chest lifts up more, rolling the shoulder back with the throat soft. This is the first asana that we would be approaching. This interlock needs to be done on both sides. One side, one little finger is free. When I change it, the other side, that is, if it's the right, then the left little finger will become free for the other side. After this asana, the next one that we are going to is Urdhva Baddanguli Asana. I'd like to add a bit of detail. Here we are doing it with the usage of many very minimal props. But if you had more props, you could also approach this sequence in various ways. This is the approach that we are taking today. In Urdhva Baddanguli you take your hands in front. Once again, interlock your hands. As mentioned, the first time you interlock, one little finger will be down. You have to make sure you're repeating it for the second time where the other little finger is down. Now proceeding further, here this interlock is inverted. Now when you invert this interlock itself, you should not alienate the chest. That is, you shouldn't push the interlock out and hunch your back. The inverting of the interlock itself should come from the spine. That is the way you have to mindfully mobilize the spine. So as you invert the interlock, it should come by integrating the dorsal spine, and then the practitioner takes the arm up. Every time the arm goes up, the intercostal muscles or the side body should lengthen. When the side body lengthens, you see the side body unmistakably lengthens with Urdhva Baddanguli Asana. The practitioner then has to go to the sternum, which as I showed you could be caved in. He has to project the bottom sternum out and then raise it up. To do this, the arm should be behind the ear. Now as you can see, the arm is clearly behind the ear, and this arm going back action, I'll show you the difference. When the arm comes in front, the body drops, the chest drops, it invites a hunch. So the arm should go behind the ear, nicely giving a vibrant raise to the chest. But to further develop it, I'd like the practitioner to look up and for the eyes to see the wrists. And when the eyes look at the palm, you see the ear goes a little back. Then I'd like the practitioner to further take the upper arm behind the ear. The more the upper arm goes behind the ear, the more the engagement of the dorsal, and then I would like him to straighten his head. That way, the arm stays more behind the ear, and therefore the opening of the chest is further developed. This would be our second pose. The third asana that we are now looking at is Paschima Namaskara Asana. Usually, Paschima Namaskara Asana would require a little more preparation, but for lack of time, we are going straight away to this asana. In Paschima Namaskara Asana, it is where the Namaskara is coming aligned with the back body. At this, it would be at the dorsal spine. To go into the Paschima Namaskara Asana pose, we widen the shoulder, raise the chest, pull the back ribs in, interlock the arms behind the body, the palms behind the body. We invert the interlock and really climb the Namaskara up the back until it goes towards the dorsal spine. As you can see, when the body hunches, the dorsal spine protrudes. So the fact that you have a Namaskara there really force pushes that dorsal spine front towards the sternum. As I said, that would require a little more preparation, but we are just exhibiting a sequence for your understanding now. So in this Paschim Namaskara, it's important that the shoulder is wide and rolled back, but even more, there is a possibility that when a person goes to Paschim Namaskara, when the arm goes up, the elbows protrude forward. That will still not serve the purpose because the spine would collapse, the chest would collapse. So here the elbows have to be driven to the backmost point possible. Shoulder should be pulled back, and this Namaskara itself should be joined firm at the thumb side of the wrist as well as the little finger side of the wrist. There is usually a temptation for the thumbs to separate. You should press the wrist in its entirety. Then you have to drive the Namaskara into the body as if it's not an external Namaskara, it's that which salutes the sternum straight. And so it has to drive from the dorsal, push the dorsal in towards the sternum, and then the sternum raises up elaborately, therefore once again developing the open chest position. The next asana that we would now be seeing is Parshvottanasana. In Parshvottanasana, it can be done in several ways. The hands can be kept in several positions. For example, hands can be kept on the waist, hands can be kept in Baddhahasta, hands can be kept in Gomukhasana, in Paschim Namaskarasana. Because we've already shown Paschim Namaskarasana, we are using this in Parshvottanasana as a progression. So here, the practitioner has already jumped with the legs apart and then turned to one side. This has already been done. Here then, he will roll the shoulders back, pull the back ribs in, raise the chest up, and then move to Paschima Namaskarasana as was shown before. In Paschima Namaskarasana, once again, there is a mistake that you can make. That is, you may sink the chest and collapse the chest onto the Namaskarasana. That is a wrong composition, wrong approach to the asana. Instead, the chest has to be opened wide, sternum has to be raised tall, shoulders has to be raised, as if it is the Paschima Namaskara from the back that is penetrating the sternum, upon which the spine is raising. So the first one is a fallen spine. The second one is using the injection of the Paschima Namaskara from dorsal to sternum. The spine has to be built in length over it. Then the practitioner has to look up as if the raise of the spine causes the throat to extend and the eyes to look up. Elbow should be firmly back. From there, with this open face of the chest, which is starkly different from a hunched back, the practitioner then proceeds to the full pose where the head is taken down on top of to touch the shin. Here once again you must watch that the elbows are up so that the Namaskara can be firmly placed dorsal to sternum, and then pressing the feet, leading with the sternum forward. The touch of the Namaskara from dorsal to sternum must always be looked at. That's what we meant by saying eyes should look inward. Looking, extending the sternum, the practitioner then comes up and completes the pose. Now, I would like to add that traditionally, if Parshvottanasana were to be the first pose without this preparation, it's possible that a person could take the hands up in Urdhva Namaskarasana, sinking the chest and really stooping forward, where they quickly touch the head and come up, where this is a mechanical doing of the posture. The eyes have not, the vision is not inward, such that each part of the body is penetrated and aligned. To make it an asana, that penetration is an absolute must. We are now going to the final pose in the sequence, Setubandha Sarvangasana, which has been shown in an episode by itself. Essentially in a sequence, as I mentioned, it's a very long establishment where we use pose by pose to constantly penetrate the body. Now a sequence could have several poses, it could have a repetition of poses. Let's say if we did Adho Mukha Svanasana, we could do Adho Mukha Svanasana in various ways so that the pose is penetrated from various angles. Remember I said to open the chest itself, we can look at the sternum, we can look at the whole length of the chest away from the diaphragm, we can look at the armpit, we can look at the width of the collarbone, we can look at the roll of the shoulder back. All of this itself would be approaches for which we can have separate vibrant sequences. Now, for an overall understanding, we are moving to the final pose, Setubandha Sarvangasana. Here, we have aligned a pile of bolsters in such a way, two bolsters are vertically kept on top of one another, and two bolsters are horizontally kept on top of one another. Between the two, the horizontal and the vertical forms a T, so we call it T-shaped Setubandha Sarvangasana. Here the practitioner sits on the end of the vertical bolster that faces the horizontal bolsters, and then he lies back and then goes down all the way until the shoulder gently touches the blanket. Now if he goes down more than that, the chest will sink, so you have to be watchful. You have to go down only until the point until the shoulder touches, and then at that point you see he is only reclining, as in sleeping over it, but then the openness of the chest is unmistakably reversing what we call a stooping or a hunched spine. From there, to pull the shoulders back further and open the sternum further, the practitioner can then keep the hands by the side of the body, and then the legs can be placed on top of the bolster. The entire leg is not placed, only the heel hinges are placed on that bolster. Now, we usually end a sequence with some kind of a restorative pose. As you can see, this comes in the section of restorative pose. The practitioner can sleep, actually lie down and rest in it, because the pose by itself, the proper arrangements, as has been geniusly proposed by Guruji, once the practitioner reclines in it, that itself establishes a fully open spine, a robustly open chest, and a full restive relaxation for the body. This would be the final pose in this sequence. Now we will see how to come out of this asana. The practitioner bends the legs and puts it by the side of the bolster, and then he has to roll to the head side, the side on which the head is, until the buttock is completely rested on the ground. Then he turns to the right side with the right hand under the head like a pillow. Then pressing the left palm on the ground, he then gently looks down slightly and comes up. This pose, as we said, would be done for a long period of time, around 10 minutes or so, as a practitioner gets used to it, and this would mark the end of today's sequence.
It was nice to see how you put together the sequence of asanas with specific instruction to address the hunchback issue, especially where you showed combining the Paschima Namaskara asana with Parshvotthasana. We could distinctly see it removed the hunch. Now I have a follow-up question. When you started the sequence, you started with the Tadasana and ended with the Setubandha Sarvangasana. This sequence has to be followed in a specific order, or can I mix and match the asanas?
See, that's a good question. You've actually mentioned that, and as we saw, the entire sequence was addressing the curvature or the hunch of the spine. Now, as you noticed, we started with Tadasana, we started with plain Tadasana and then interlocked our hands behind, which itself is a progression. To interlock the hands behind itself, you needed to have something ahead of it. And then for Paschim Namaskarasana, it needed the preparation of the before too. Just like when you read a story, you read a start, you have an end, and then there is a middle when you're reading a book. Now, if I were to shuffle the pages and put it in any order, it doesn't really make a story. In that manner, when we are looking at a sequence has a definitive approach. It has a start, it has a finish, and it has a middle. When we are looking at a class or a practice, the practice doesn't start with the first asana. It first starts with an invocation. What really happens is a person may come to class from work or from a family situation or fighting through traffic, and so their frame of mind itself is now stuck with some issue that is outside class. So when we talk or start with an invocation, it's self-absorbing. They get to kind of focus inward. They go away from those situations that they came from. So the class doesn't start only with an asana, it starts right at the time of an invocation, because that's where your first invitation to go inward is. Now, after you do that, we progressively build an asana so that each step gives a gateway for the next asana and a gateway to penetrate deep within also. With every succeeding asana, we are building symmetry, we are building penetration, and we are going either towards the culminating pose or we are driving a principle more intensely. There is an intelligence in the sequence itself. It's not in any random order. It has to be progressive and it has to be penetrative.
This has been a very informative session. Is there anything else you would like to add?
Yes. As we earlier mentioned, this episode is about the guidelines for practice itself. There is one more key aspect of Iyengar Yoga. Usually we don't move from pose to pose rapidly. Our concept of asana itself is a state of total absorption, awareness and reflection. So when we go to a pose, we have so many instructions. These instructions, as mentioned several times earlier, help take us inward. But then we have to give enough time to be able to observe and then make cognitive, corrective changes wherever we need to. So the length of time for which we stay in an asana in Iyengar Yoga is longer. Of course, for a beginner, it's a different approach. They need to get the full feel of an asana itself, so they don't go into nuances. A beginner usually will try and do the full pose to their best capacities to understand the wholeness of an asana. And then as you proceed, as you practice longer, that is, as you proceed in your length of sadhana, a person would then stay for a longer duration to be able to observe plainly and then make corrections wherever necessary. So there is a length of time that we need to think about.
It's been a privilege and honor to be part of this program, especially during the birth centenary of Guruji Sri B.K.S. Iyengar. I would like to conclude with my pranams to Guruji and to you. Thank you.
It's been an absolute pleasure and a privilege to be a part of this series. My utmost gratitude to Sri B.K.S. Iyengar, who has revealed and given to us a way to practice this wonderful system of yoga. He has also shown to us that asana and pranayama are not a mere workout. It's truly a journey towards the self. It's a state of total absorption and awareness. Our utmost gratitude to him and the Iyengars. I also would like to greatly thank the DD team who have been so cooperative, as well as the IYD team. Finally, I would also like to thank you viewers who've been with me and travelled with us through these episodes. Thank you very much.